You start by trying to get at the essence and the truth of the brand. What is the essence of that brand? What is at the core? Something that you don't have to fabricate, but if you look in the archives, if you look at their behavior, if you look at like what has driven this brand for the 20 years that they've been in business, or the 5 years or whatever. So you try to get at that truth. Like, what do they really do? And what can you say about them that is true?
If you've listened to the Hope Strategy podcast for a while, or if you're new around here, there's a good chance you've heard us mention MWI, which is Josh and I's digital marketing agency. None of the Hope Strategy podcasts would be possible without MWI. And I would like to offer a free 20-minute consultation to anybody that listens to the podcast that's looking for some digital marketing help. Just go to mwi.com/hope strategy and sign up, and we'll reach out to you, and you will get a free 20-minute consultation with yours truly to talk about your digital marketing needs, to talk about your website, whatever questions you have. I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy podcast. Please reach out. I'd love to help you with your marketing. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hope Strategy podcast. I am Corey Blake, one of two hosts of the Hope Strategy podcast. If you are new here, my co-host, Josh Steinley, unfortunately was not available for this interview today. And so it was just me who had I'm selfishly kind of happy that it was just me, because it was an amazing conversation and I got him all to myself. I had the chance to talk to the unbelievable creative genius. Yes, I said genius. Jason Bagley. Jason, if you have seen, he's done amazing things all over the place, working for big brands like Nike and Kentucky Fried Chicken and Old Spice and countless other, Samsung. I know a bunch of other ones, huge brands, those commercials you've seen on TV, the creative behind a lot of those. He's been either the one that came up with the creative or a part of a collaborative team, as most creative endeavors are. We talked a lot about that, team efforts. But if you've seen the ad, the one that really blew up a number of years back, I think it was 2010, we discussed the Old Spice commercials where it's the guy, ladies, now look at your man, now back at me, now back at your man. Those hilarious commercials that went absolutely viral. I think they have over 200 million views on YouTube. Those in addition to all of the inspiring and awesome ads that you've seen for Nike and other, those when Jason was the executive creative director at Wieden Kennedy. He's no longer there anymore, Wieden and Kennedy. He was on the creative team and the executive director of creative when those ads all came out. So super cool to talk with him. We covered everything from his upbringing and his kind of introduction into creativity and his early exploration into what that was, and how he never fathomed that he was going to be able to build a career around his knack for being funny and creative and loving to write and loving to do things around film and things like that. We followed through his journey of school and then eventually getting the job of his dreams, and talked a lot about goal setting and kind of envisioning your future and seeing, things come into fruition as you work really hard and set things down, set goals down on paper. It was such a cool conversation. I've always looked up to Jason and have followed his work very closely as somebody in advertising and marketing on a much smaller scale than what Jason has done. But it was an absolute pleasure to talk to him. You're really going to enjoy this. He's hilarious. He's funny. He's smart. He's the man. Please enjoy this episode with Jason Bagley.
Something is happening in our world.
Time is very precious.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
Hope in the face of difficulty.
More than machinery, we need humanity.
Hope in the face of uncertainty.
I'm better now than I was. I'm experienced now.
Changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it.
The audacity of hope.
This is the Hope Strategy podcast with Corey Blake and Josh Steinley. So, okay, let's go way back. I have had the privilege of meeting a number of your family members, and I've always been interested. I want to hear a little bit about your upbringing, because I've been interested in the fact that so many of you seem so creative. Like, obviously you were your creative director and chief whatever at Wieden Kennedy and Deutsch and all these places. But you
The pinnacle of them. Just say it. I'm the pinnacle.
You are the pinnacle of all of the Bagleys. You are if they all aspire to be brother Jason. But where does that come from? What was your guys' upbringing like? And what is it, like a nature thing? Is it a nurture thing? What was your upbringing like? And how does it tie into your creativeness today? Creativeness a word? I think it is.
It is now. It is now. I think that's a great question. It's interesting. I think I grew up in a very blue collar. My dad was a house painter, and I worked the summers with him. Hated every minute of it. In the Arizona heat, 120 degrees, working with my dad all summer, waking up at 3:30, 4 in the morning. But I grew up in kind of I would say, lower middle class area, and surrounded by a lot of blue collar kind of people and, ethic. And so being creative, first of all, making a living off creativity never crossed my mind, not for a split second. And as to why I turned out the way I did, I think my dad, and I learned this the older I got, that my dad is a very creative person. And even though he was just a house painter and he grew up on a ranch in Wyoming as a child, but he was sort of a repressed comedian. And
now that you mentioned it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think he always had this desire to entertain and make people laugh, and had a great sense of humor. And my mom has a great sense of humor, and my family, there weren't a lot of rules. There was high expectations in my family, but very few rules. There was a lot of freedom, and it was just a very safe place. My parents were not critical people at all. They were very encouraging. My dad didn't say much at all. There wasn't much criticism, but there wasn't much praise either. There just wasn't much words coming out of his mouth. Yeah. Especially when I was younger. I think he's become more talkative now, but so I guess
was that just the mindset of dad goes and works hard all day and comes home and gets us a hearty meal and relaxes for the evening? I mean, was it just kind of of the times? You know what I mean? Was that?
I think it was definitely more of a traditional role like that. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she had 8 kids, so I don't know how you wouldn't be a stay-at-home mom when you have 8 children.
Yeah.
But and my mom was the type of woman that could have run any company. She's definitely CEO material.
Yeah.
And that was just her choice, that she wanted to stay home and be a mom. And that's, I think, what feminism is all about. Do whatever, you get to choose what you want to do. And that was what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
But it was just a very free, uncritical home where you were kind of free to be who you wanted to be and do what you wanted to do for the most part. And I was, from a very young age, just drawn to comedy, to all sorts of film, but particularly to comedy. And I remember as a kid, sometimes, I used to watch Saturday Night Live when I was with my friends. We would watch it together, but usually as a young kid, late on Saturday night, I was at home. And so I would often be down in the basement by myself watching Saturday Night Live, rolling on the ground, laughing, just laughing.
Who was the cast then, that you remember? Who were the ones who were you looking forward to seeing on SNL back then?
I don't remember how old I was at what particular age, but I remember, Chris Farley, Adam Sandler, David Spade,
yeah,
all those guys. And so I was really inspired by, just loved SNL, loved movies like Naked Gun and Airplane, and only realized many, many years later how much movies like Naked Gun and Airplane influenced what Old Spice became.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say there's a definite tie for sure.
I had no idea when we were creating that brand and that work. I had no conscious awareness.
Yeah,
How much the comedy is kind of similar to that genre movie of Naked Gun and Airplane.
Is that Leslie Nelson? Is that the actor's name?
Yeah, Leslie Nelson.
It's funny because those were two, like growing up, we had our case, like our case where we had movies, and there was a few options. And one of them was Naked Gun 33 1/3. One of them was Airplane, which is shocking that I was watching that. One of them was like the Little Rascals box set. Like we had the whole box, and then we had a couple other ones, a couple Disney movies or something. But those are the movies like I go back and watch now, and I'm like, I was like 7 or 8 years old, like going and popping this in the VCR by myself and watching it. And I would never let my 8 or 9 year old watch either of those two movies now.
I know. What happened is when I became aware of this is we were producing a digital interactive campaign for Old Spice that I think we called it Wolf Dog, but the idea was that it was for launching this new scent, this new animal-based collection.
Okay.
And so the idea was that because these were scents that were inspired by animals, that it only made sense that we hand over the CMO position to a wolf at Spice. And so we had this wolf that basically ran the marketing for a week. And it was this live interactive thing. And we rented this big house in Redondo Beach, California. And we're just producing stuff, just pumping out crazy stuff for a week. But it had a home theater. It was like this mansion. So instead of renting a studio, our producer, Mike Davidson, was like, look, it's actually, we didn't have a lot of money for this idea. And he's like, it's actually cheaper for us to rent this mansion on the beach in Redondo Beach and just produce everything out of the mansion than it is to go rent like a studio and then all have hotel rooms. So we literally like lived in the mansion and shot, but they had a home theater there. And one of the only movies they had was Naked Gun. And so one night we were watching it, and this was years into the work that we did for Old Spice. And my partner at the time, Craig Allen, was there, and we're watching Naked Gun, and we're like, oh my gosh, this is Old Spice. Like,
yeah.
This is totally like unbeknownst to us, subconsciously in our mind, this is where a lot of the comedy probably came from. So that was kind of fun to kind of make that connection.
I've heard that as you said that, I'm thinking like, oh yeah, like even the look, the feel, the wit, the humor, like very similar. That had to have been an interesting moment to realize that somewhere in the back of your mind there was this itch that needed to be scratched, and it came out in Old Spice for comedically.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So I've heard that you as a kid, you'd like record radio spots, or you would do like TV, like you had a video camera or something, and you would make commercials. And is that something that you remember doing? Like, was that an outlet for you as a kid creatively, or like using your humor in that way?
Yeah. From a very young age, in fact, it started with like the old, this is how old I am, audio cassette recorders. They were the little like black thing, and you put it on the cassette, and it was just like one little speaker, kind of a rectangular shaped thing. Most of your listeners will not even know what I'm talking about. But
is that like you push play and record at the same time or something like that? Yeah.
And so that was probably the very beginning. And it was actually my cousin Melissa, your sister-in-law.
Yeah.
We used to record like satirical soap operas on these audio things. And
do these exist anymore?
That would be a miracle if anybody could find them.
Oh, that would be amazing.
And then later, when the camcorder came about, my friends and I would record skits. Not commercials were definitely part of it, but just any sort of comedy skit, we would record and just had a blast doing that. And some of them kind of the equivalent of going viral at the time was these audio cassettes would get passed around our high school, and literally the physical tape would be like getting passed from group to group so that because people wanted to watch it. But kind of from as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to make stuff to entertain people. And again, never at no point did I ever think, oh, this is how I'll make a living.
Yeah.
I just didn't know anybody that did that at that time. That just wasn't even a possibility in my mind.
It's crazy to think that wasn't that long ago that, like you said, like going viral was handing a tape around school or whatever. But I was just listening to an interview. I love Fred Armisen. Like Fred Armisen is like my go-to. I've watched every interview he's done. I think I've watched everything he's done. Like for me, he's just the best. I've heard him say in multiple interviews that before he got SNL, he was a musician for a long time. He was in a band. He was a drummer for like years and years and years. But he started when they would go, he was like bored of just being the drummer at like this decent band that wasn't getting anywhere. So they'd be traveling the country. And then he created these characters and he would go out and interview people as the character, like at the concerts. And like Fred Acito was one of them he did on SNL as well. But it was like this. So he'd go out and he'd interview people. And that's how he was found. It's like those cassettes that he did were passed around from people. And then eventually somebody that was actually had some influence in comedy was like, this is hilarious stuff, you know? And the next thing you know is like a 35-year-old or whatever, got picked up on SNL and was there for 11 years. It's crazy. But that wasn't that long ago. Like that really, it was in my lifetime, you know, like it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. It wasn't that long ago, and yet things have changed.
Well, how many times have the Old Spice commercials been seen on YouTube? Like 200 million probably or something like.
I don't know. I don't know what the total.
It's a lot.
Total number.
You couldn't have fathomed that at that time. Like it would have been your mind couldn't even have gone there to even consider that was possible.
Yeah. And that's one of the cool things about the career that I've been able to have and just the possibilities that a career like advertising has is that I never, as the son of a painting contractor in Arizona who didn't know anybody really until later in life that worked in any kind of creative field, I just never in my wildest dreams imagined that I would be a part of creating something that got seen by millions and millions, like hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm very grateful that I found kind of my calling, that I am not living on the street somewhere, that I actually found something I can do. And also grateful to Wyden and Kennedy for giving me a shot and providing the type of creative environment that, somebody could do their thing and bring their voice and their creative vision to light, and for me and a lot of other people. So kind of amazing to look back on.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was looking at stuff before the interview. I looked at, so the short story is that Wyden and Kennedy started an advertising agency in Oregon. What year was it? In the 80s?
I think it was mid 80s.
Yeah.
Like 85 or something.
And they didn't have any clients, or maybe a couple of small clients. And then there was this unknown shoe company out of Oregon, Nike, right? And so they picked up, which is just unfathomable as well, that wasn't that long ago that Nike was just like, hey, I got an idea, And so they pick up that, and obviously ever since then they've been in charge of Nike's advertising. But I was thinking, like, these guys who started as the creatives, it's an interesting thing to have to pass on for somebody else to be in charge of when it's so specific. And so, like anytime we do work at our agency that's creative, whether it's website design or creative for ads or something, like that's always the most criticized thing, right? It's just, there's no way around it. You see things differently than they see things. You're looking at it from two different perspectives. But I bet that was interesting as they scaled and grew into this worldwide company that they are now, to eventually be able to hand off that creative process and trust and create a space, a free space where people could bring radical ideas to the table, or new, takes on something, especially, comedically, that they would be able to put their money behind and say, yeah, let's do that. Let's take some big risks.
Yeah. I think that's a credit to the fact that Dan and Dave created a very strong culture that was bigger than them. And it was less, although Dan in particular, but they're both amazing men. But Dan in particular, because David Kennedy retired quite a few years ago, and Dan kind of continued to grow the agency. But he's, Dan's very charismatic and very wise, and you feel like half the things that come out of his mouth are quotable and amazing. But he was never trying to create a cult. He wasn't trying to create a thing that was dependent upon him. He actually, Dan and Dave both, they wanted to create something that was kind of independent of them. That was, in fact, Dan was inspired by and likes to talk about kind of modeling the agency's culture and structure off slime mold, which is a like single-celled organism that has no brain, but somehow it can't, like on its own, it can't do anything, but it comes together with other slime molds, and together they can form a blob, and they can like move and go find food.
Wow.
They can climb up things. Individually, they can't do that, but together, and no one's directing them. They don't know how it happens. Actually, they don't know like who's deciding that there's a piece of food over there to the left, and then they're all going that way. And he was kind of inspired by that, about like, let's create an environment and then just bring in amazingly talented, unique people of all different walks of life, and then just sort of let them run free and let them do their thing and bring their voice and their creative vision to things, and not have it be like Dan and Dave's creative vision for everything. Yeah. And so they really did an amazing job of creating that culture, so that even as they became less and less involved, it continued to go on, because the mission of the agency, which the real mission of the agency is to create a place where people can come to do the best work of their lives. That's the quote. And so that's what, as a leader of the agency, that was what drove me every day. That's awesome. That was my job, is to make sure that I was helping to make sure that it remained a place where people could come to do the best work of their lives.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of the stuff you would post on social media from time to time of the culture there. Like, and it seems like a lot of it. So Dan is the one, Wyden is the one that stuck around longer.
Yeah, he's not really involved anymore.
But he was longer than.
Yeah, he was quite a bit longer than.
But I feel like I remember seeing you post stuff, events at the office, which looked amazing. The office itself looked unreal. But I remember something about like, was it like a day celebrating him or something like that, or like the culture kind of rallying, the company like rallying to do something for him? I can't remember. In like an auditorium, it looked like you guys had or something.
We have we celebrate Founders Day.
Okay, that's what it is.
Kennedy celebrates Founders Day, and that is a celebration of both Dan and Dave, and they come to that event, and it's a big party, a big event each year that we do.
That's awesome. So you going back again? So you could never have fathomed making a great living, doing something creative. It didn't seem possible, or wasn't even in the realm of possibility as you were looking at school and stuff. So what did you end up going to college for? And then how did that transition happen? Like when did you have that first glimmer of like, wait a minute, like there might be an actual job opportunity using these natural skill sets that I have?
Well, I like to say that I got a master's degree in undergraduate work, because it took me so long to graduate from college.
That's one way to put it. I could say the same thing.
and that's mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do. Like everything sounded awful. Everything that sounded secure and financially viable just seemed horrible to me.
Were you like me, where at one point you were going to do everything though? Like I was like for sure at some one point going to be a pilot. And I was like, no, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a dentist. I'm going to be a chiropractor. I'm going to be like, I went through the everything thinking like, that's what I'm going to do. But I was the same way. Like on the surface, I was like, I think I'm supposed to say this. Like, I think I need to start figuring this out. But underneath I was like, that sounds terrible. I have no interest in doing that. Or did you just say, no, I'm not going to do anything?
I literally didn't have a clue. I wasn't even as far along as you of saying the wrong thing. I was just like, I don't know what I want to do. And so what I ended up doing while I was essentially killing time was I would just take the classes that I wanted to take. Mm-hmm. And those almost all were somehow related to writing or creativity. And, I took a lot of film classes, literature and film, the history of film. I took photography classes. I took creative writing classes. And I was just sort of killing time, like I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to take this fun class. And then eventually I was like, literally have to figure this out because every single one of my friends has graduated and I cannot just be a professional student. So I went and I heard about, there was a career placement test that was very well respected. I think it was created by Harvard or some Ivy League school. And you go and you take it, and then you meet a week or so later, you meet with a counselor and they go over the results with you. And so I'm like, I got to go take this. And so I took it, and a week later I'm meeting with the counselor, and he said, in all of my years, I've been doing this test for like 10 years. And it always narrows it down to three to four things that are like, this person could do, one of these three things. He says, this is the first time that I have ever given this test where it only gives me one option.
Wow.
And it basically says you need to work in the creative department of an advertising agency.
Wow.
That's the only option you have.
Props to the guy or girl that made that test. Jeez Louise, nailed it. You were the one. If it only worked for you, it worked for someone. Yeah.
And apparently this is the only career that I was ever capable of doing. So thank you for the person who invented that test.
Did you experience that? Do you remember taking those like film classes or the writing classes where you felt for the first time like, oh yeah, this is in me. Something in me is like really enjoys this. You know what I mean? Like that, like you're in the right spot at the right time. Did you start to have those hunches as you were taking those classes and stuff? Not necessarily this is what I'm going to do for work, but like this is that feeling of like, this is my thing. I'm in the right place at the right time doing this exact thing.
Before choosing my major, I don't think so. Yeah. I think I was so oblivious that even though I never made the connection, even though I loved, there was a reason I kept taking those classes. There was a reason I loved. I mean, I considered majoring in film, but I just thought that's the most irresponsible thing in the world. Like, I can't make a living doing that. Yeah. But I loved film. I loved my film classes. And I really enjoyed my writing classes. But for some reason in my head, and maybe it was my blue collar background, I just couldn't make the jump of, I love these creative things and I should do that for a living.
Well, how many people did you know at that point in your life that did that?
I did know one. I only knew one. I had a cousin that was actually in advertising, but I don't think I really totally understood what he did fully. Yeah. And so it wasn't until I took that test and then decided to major in it. And at that time, BYU did not have a very good creative program. They have an excellent program now, but they didn't have much of anything. But when I got in and I actually started to create, to work as a creative on some stuff, that's when I finally felt like, oh, I feel like a fish in water. Like this, this feels like something I can do. And I seem to be, it comes maybe a little bit easier to me than other people.
The reason I asked that question, it was a leading question, but the reason why is because I was the same as you, didn't know what I was going to do I had said like, I'm going to try this, and I'd kind of gone through the list of things that I thought I was supposed to do. It was very much like an outside pressure thing. Like, oh, I got married and I got a kid. Like what I'm supposed to have a job lined up, And so, I considered not going back to school because I hated it. I was saying in my undergrad, like it was brutal. I really did not enjoy it. To me, and not knowing anything and not having perspective, that undergrad stuff was like, it was killing me. I couldn't stand it. But I felt like, the feeling I came to after pondering on it and thinking on like, should I just drop out, and go start a business or something, was that I needed to stop preoccupying myself and worrying so much about studying something because I was supposed to get a job from it, but to figure out something that I really felt innately, I need to come up with a better way to say this because I bring it up all the time, but like something innately, like something I was good at. It was a natural skill set, a natural ability, and not even that, but just something I was interested in. It wasn't as much like, oh, I'm creative. What I studied was international culture studies with communications and anthropology emphasis. But having grown up all over the world and seeing different cultures and experiencing all these different things and loving communication and how people say things and why and languages and all this stuff, as soon as I started studying those classes for my degree, I all of a sudden loved school. It was like, oh, this is the best. It was figuring out that thing that didn't feel like, somebody's got a gun to my head and I have to finish this math equation in 5 minutes, like it was just like, no, I can study something that is innately interesting and, something that I should be studying to kind of better myself and the things I'm already naturally good at,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. And it relates to something that I always say to when young people talk to me and maybe they come to the office or I visit a university and I'm talking to students, and somebody comes up and they say, I think I want to be a creative. I want to be a creative. I think I want to do what you do. And the question I always ask them is, did you like to write when you were growing up? When you were at some point younger or even now, did you just write a lot? Did you write in your journal? Did you write stories? Did you write skits? And if not, did you draw? Did you make art constantly? Were you constantly doodling or illustrating or drawing in some way? And if they don't answer yes to one of those two questions, they don't actually want to be a creative.
Yeah.
They like the idea of being creative in an advertising agency, but I've never met anyone who was a creative in an advertising agency who hadn't, in one form or another, always been doing it from the time that they were young. They either were into art and illustration and painting, or doodling, usually like just doodling and drawing at the younger ages, or they were in some form of writing. They were just somebody who felt compelled to write. And for me, it was, I would, of course, like I told you, I made skits and different productions with my friends, but I also wrote in my journal, and I have like a chest filled with journals. Like I don't know how many journals, 25 journals Was
that more like classic journal stuff? You were just writing about your life and what you were doing, or were you actually writing like funny stuff down in there, or like things you noticed, or?
That was more just journal writing. It was like classic, just writing about my stupid teenage
Your
life.
diary. Yeah.
But the point is, I felt this to write. And if you don't really love writing or love creating art, at least in terms of being an art director or a copywriter, you're probably not going to enjoy the job, because that's what the job is. So I would say to put that broader. And this doesn't work 100% of the time, because sometimes like people might love to be a stockbroker or whatever, and they didn't have a chance to do anything like that as a kid. But I would encourage people to look at like, what did you do? What either do you do or have you done in your life that nobody made you do it? You just did it because you felt compelled to, and you just enjoyed doing it, or you were good at it, and see if you can find some clues to what you might really want to do for your living.
That's great advice. And it's something I see when hiring, because anymore, like the internet, it's just leveled the playing field and so especially creatively, right? Like a lot of the guys on, speaking of SNL, a lot of the guys on SNL and girls on SNL now are there because for the last 15 years they've been creating, or I guess maybe 11 years have been creating YouTube content, and they created these channels. Some of them didn't even have huge viewings, but they couldn't help but create these funny things on, on YouTube. Or create another website where they posted all of their content. I know a ton of stand-ups and a lot of comedians. What's the word I'm looking for? Improvisers. It's funny, I couldn't remember the word improvise, but a lot of improvisers that created their own website and did that. And then people come to us all the time and they say, hey, I just graduated. I want to be a web developer. You're like, okay, let me see the websites that you've built, because there's so many tools out there now. It's like, you should have done that. And it's like, oh, well, no, I haven't had a job yet. It's like, if you really wanted to be a web developer, you would have been hacking away and figuring this out. And the best ones I know are the ones that I don't even know if they have a degree. I just know that they're really good at web development, because they've been doing it since they were 10.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Okay. So so what did you study then? I guess it was advertising. I
did advertising with a minor in English or creative writing.
And then your first job out of college was not the sexiest creative job, if I recall.
No, my first job, I actually worked at 3 different places for mainly one place, but I worked at 3 different agencies in Salt Lake City for my first 3 years.
Okay.
And
were you just copywriting?
Yep. I was in the creative department, and I enjoyed it. It was immediately something that I enjoyed, that I was, it was a fun job, even though not every project was sexy. I was straight out of school. I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly, I would say maybe about a year to a year and a half in, I realized that my ambitions and the stage that I wanted to play on and the work that I wanted to do was not going to happen in Salt Lake City. And I also knew that I wasn't going to be able to do the work for my existing clients in Salt Lake City to get a good enough portfolio to get me hired at a place like Wieden & Kennedy.
Were they on your radar at that point as like the go-to spot or one of the?
Yeah, at that point, it was kind of the golden age of creative advertising, because at that point there were quite a few agencies that were doing amazing work. Mm-hmm. I would say much more so than now. There was, Wieden & Kennedy, Goodby Silverstein and Partners, Crispin Porter Bogusky, Fallon, and those, just to name some of the bigger ones, but there was a lot of other smaller ones that were all doing fantastic work. And I would have loved to work at any of those places, but I would say at that time, Crispin and Wieden were at the very top, and Wieden was probably my dream job, but I kind of thought that was an impossibility. No one had ever, in the history of Salt Lake City advertising, no creative had ever made the jump to Wieden & Kennedy. But I knew that's what I wanted. I knew I wanted to get hired by one of these creative agencies because I wanted to do the type of work that I was seeing them do. And so I started just working nights and weekends on a spec portfolio of just fake ads. And that's what I did, almost every night. And
so you were just picking a product. You'd say, do you remember an example that you of something you did?
Martinelli's sparkling apple cider was one. There was one for a furniture company.
And were you doing, what kind of ads were you creating for the spec ads?
Some were print campaigns, some were video campaigns. And for the video, I just shot on a camcorder. They looked horrible.
Do you have those still?
I do have them somewhere. And
that's awesome.
It was a fun experience. It was a lot of work, but I tried to come up with ideas that you would get the idea despite the terrible production value. Mm-hmm. And my goal over time, over this year and a half when I was working nights and weekends to put the spec portfolio together to get hired at one of these better agencies, it evolved, but I got to a point where I realized at first I was trying to make what I thought those agencies would want.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally realized, you know what, the only way for me to love this and for me to end up in the right spot for the right reasons is if I just try to do what I love and just try to make a portfolio that I personally think everything in there is great, and it speaks to me, and it represents the type of creative that I am capable of and that I want to do. And I stopped worrying about like what's Wyden going to want or what's Fallon going to want, and I just started trying to reach my high bar and also make everything in there as crazy as I possibly could.
I was going to say, so did it immediately lean comedic? Or were you putting together stuff that was more thought provoking or, what, I mean, obviously comedic can be thought provoking, but you know what I mean? Like
there was some stuff in there that was not comedic, that was more like cool, but definitely it very much leaned comedy. And, I remember my cousin and I he was kind of doing the same thing at the same time. Mm-hmm. And we used to say that our goal was to make a portfolio that people either hate or love.
Yeah. Polarizing a little bit.
Yeah. That no one would be kind of on the fence on. They would either just think this is horrible, I don't like this at all, or they would love it. And that's exactly, I can say I succeeded at that because there were a few agencies that were just like, I don't know what you're even doing. Your work is not going to work for anybody. And then there was Wyden Kennedy who
got it.
When Dan Wyden saw it, he immediately, the timing was perfect, but he immediately told the recruiter to get me up to Portland for an interview.
So how did you send that up to them then, or how did you get it in front of them in the first place?
There was a guy named Tim Hanrahan, an art director and creative director at Wyden Kennedy, who came to Salt Lake to speak at an ad club thing. Okay. And I went to that, and I stayed afterwards and just pestered Tim Hanrahan, just like asked him so many questions about Wyden Kennedy and what it takes to get there. And he was very patient and very long suffering with my endless questions. And literally for an hour, I just pestered him with questions. And at the end of it, I said, would you be willing to just take a look at my portfolio and just give me advice and kind of mentor me on my portfolio? And he said that he would, and he gave me his email address. And so he was really a key. Over the course of the next year, every 3 months or so, I would send him my portfolio, and he would kind of destroy it and, tell me what he liked and mostly what he didn't like. And then I did not think I was going to get hired at Wyden Kennedy. And I did not think, when I would send him my portfolio, I didn't think, oh, maybe they'll hire me. I was just thrilled to be getting advice. Feedback. Yeah. From Wyden Kennedy Creative. I was just so happy about that. And then finally, when I really overhauled my portfolio and sent the best version that I had ever had and that I felt really represented me. Again, just sent it for his feedback. And the next thing I know, the phone rang, and the recruiter said, Dan loves your work and he wants to fly you to Portland.
I can imagine, like you can hear in the story, you can hear the amount of passion for that, passion that went into it. And if you're looking at this and saying like, man, why didn't Kennedy? Yeah, right. That's not going to happen. But wow, what if, or, oh man, it's just an honor or this to have the opportunity to communicate with an employee there and get his feedback. Like you can hear like how far-fetched this seemed to you. How nerve-wracking must that have been to be like, okay, I guess I'm going to Portland and I'm meeting with the man himself, like, I mean, what was that process like, and how did you hang in that situation?
It was just surreal. It was absolutely surreal. I couldn't believe it was happening. I'm looking for something because I want to show. Oh, here it is. So as much as there was a part of me that didn't believe that getting hired at a place like Wyden was possible. I made this little kind of a mission statement thing, and I put it on a foam core, and it's all tattered and worn. And I would carry this. This is the actual thing that I would carry in my pocket every day and read it at least once a day. And among other things, it said, it's so small that I can't even read it, but this was back when my eyesight was good.
Yeah, I love that. Now it's been years, and now we got to pull out the old glasses.
It says on here, I work in a 100 square foot satellite office of Wieden & Kennedy.
Wow.
And then it goes into more details about like the type of work that I wanted to make and everything. But I was trying to like get myself to believe that that was possible. And I carried this little thing around for about probably a year or a year and a half before I got that phone call. And so it was very surreal. I was very nervous, but they had more or less told me that they wanted to hire me before they flew me out. So they kind of took some of the pressure off, and I was just basically hoping to not blow it in the interview.
Yeah.
And so
this goes to the much bigger picture here, and I don't want to get too meta or anything, but that's insane that as far-fetched as it was and stuff, that you took it upon yourself to write down these goals. It looks like, I mean, just because you can't, if you're listening, you can't see it. It was just a little, what is that, like 3x4 or something? It's like a little piece of paper and you wrote on both sides of it.
Yeah.
It was just kind of like affirmation type stuff. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm putting it out there.
Yeah. It was basically just trying to envision the life that I wanted to have, across many different areas, but one of them was my career.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was basically like.
Do you remember why you did that? Do you remember like what impacted you to think to do that?
That's kind of ever since high school. My mom is she's a person that kind of believes in miracles and believes in faith, and that anything can happen if we have enough faith and belief. And in fact, she took my brother and I out of school in high school. She had gone to this goal setting seminar, and she was so impressed with it. It was like a full day thing that she said, all right, you and your brother Richard you're going to miss school this Thursday. I'm sending you to this seminar. And so she sent us to this all day seminar with a bunch entirely adults.
Yeah.
We were the only like high school and middle school kids there. And that among other things kind of opened my mind and really just got me into this habit of goal setting and trying to envision the life that you wanted to have. And so I had kind of done that. That was something that I practiced in my life since high school. So it was natural to, and sometimes I didn't always do it. And sometimes you sort of get off track and you stop living your life as intentionally as you want to.
Yeah.
Or as you you should. But I do, I've had a lot of experiences like that where I am a strong believer that if you put your mind to something and if you envision it and if you describe it and feel it with enough detail and emotion, that eventually it will happen.
Yeah, I feel like one of the common trends that I am seeing as we're talking to awesome people like you is the intention behind things. People that have like reached their goals and made a huge impact on the world or on their family or on their religion or whatever it might be, have been very intentional. Like it didn't just happen. It wasn't like, oh, whoa, what do you know? Like I just woke up and Wyden Kennedy called me and asked if I wanted to come interview for a job, or like I didn't just blast out my resume to 50 people. It's like, no, I wrote down years before the one place and I looked at in my mind's eye, the place I want to be. That happens a lot. A lot of the people that I've talked to have had that. And I've seen that obviously with other people that I've worked with and stuff. That's awesome. So you then went on to Wyden Kennedy. So you got the job, you didn't screw it up. You didn't show up and they said, whoa, you're way better on paper or, than you are in person. So you got the job and you started as a copywriter, right? So you were on a creative team managed by a creative director that was overseeing a certain amount of clients. What were some of the first, like, oh my gosh, I'm really like helping write copy for this client?
It was unbelievably intimidating because within my first week of being there, and I was at this point, I was so happy and amazed that they had offered me a job, but I was also 100% certain that they were going to discover that I was a fraud and that I was not good enough to be there and that I would be kicked out the back door within a month.
That's the other common thread is that, what's the
imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is very real. Like with anybody that's like set those type of goals, whether it's an athlete or an actor or whatever, like, or just an entrepreneur, that happens so often where it's like, oh wait, now I did it. They're going to figure out that I shouldn't be here. Like I'm not supposed to be sitting at this table. That happens all the time.
Oh yeah. I was so, and this continued that for years. I face, and I think it's incredibly common particularly for creatives, for everybody, but really imposter syndrome is like very, it's like the force is strong with this one. Imposter syndrome is strong with the creatives because we're doing something, we're dealing in the magical arts of creativity and it's somewhat uncontrollable and unpredictable. And like, yeah, I came up with a great idea the last time, but I don't really know how I came up with it. Mm-hmm. And therefore I don't know how I'm going to come up with it the next time. And so it was incredibly intimidating. And within the first week of being there, I ran into Mike Byrne, who was the creative director. He'd since founded Anomaly, the agency in New York. But he and Hal Curtis were like, hey, we want to put you on a Nike brief. And I was like, they were like, do you want to get on a Nike brief? And of course I said, yes, I can't say no to a Nike brief, but I was like, this is it. I'm gonna 1 week in and I'm going to be discovered as a total fraud. And they were incredible. And all the creative directors that I worked with were like, it was very different than I thought. I thought it would be like a bunch of arrogant, like geniuses that were mean and impatient with the lack of brilliance from common people like me. And it was just the opposite. I found the people to be incredibly generous and humble and interesting and cool. And so it was just a great experience, although I continued to be incredibly intimidating. But I got Moviephone.com was one of the first campaigns I did. I did a spot with Nike. The Moviephone campaign and a Nike spot were the first two things that I created. And I was lucky that I actually got those produced pretty quickly after getting there.
So how long did it take to, I'm sure it's still on some levels that imposter syndrome is still real as you do different things and work on bigger campaigns or work with different people or whatever. But how long did it take until you realized, oh no, this process is something I'm good at? Like I've done it enough. I've done it a few times now to where, I'm confident that if I keep putting in the work, it's going to keep turning out a result.
Yeah. It only took about 17 or 18 years to get over that. Yeah.
I thought you were going to give a very specific month. I was like, wow, that's crazy. You remember 17 months?
No, I would say no longer. Don't worry. It will not take longer than 18 to 25 years to get over it. I don't think you ever totally get over it, but I think you do. You definitely gain more confidence the longer you do it. And you just kind of gain the faith that things are going to work out. Like if we work hard and if we do certain things, we will. If we work hard enough, a good idea is going to come out of this at some point.
What does that look like? So this is for me too. I do marketing and advertising digitally, and it's on a very small scale compared to the ginormous campaigns that you've run. What does it look like for the common person like myself and anybody listening that sees these commercials on TV or that sees these big YouTube production, YouTube ads that they see before they watch whatever? Like, what is the process from idea? Like, or what, are you sitting around a table? Is it, now obviously probably Zoom meetings, or, is it just like a war room situation where it's like everybody throw ideas out and then we're going to come, we really like that. So what does that brainstorm look like, or that initial process for these campaigns? Maybe even what does the brand tell you first? Like, this is what we're looking for. What type of brief do you get? And then walk me through that process to like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then boom, there you go. You see it on TV when you're watching the Super Bowl.
Well, it's not always the same, as you know, in every case, but generally speaking, at a place like Wieden+Kennedy, and that's, I have the greatest expertise. If I have any expertise, it's on how Wieden+Kennedy does things. But I think you start by trying to get at the essence and the truth of the brand, of like, what is there anything, and there always is, but what is the essence of that brand? What is at the core? Something that you don't have to fabricate, but if you look in the archives, if you look at their behavior, if you look at try to figure out what has driven this brand for the 20 years that they've been in business, or the 5 years, or whatever. Very often that is the motivation and kind of mission of the founder of the company, and what drove them and what their behavior was. And so you try to get at that truth. Like, what do they really do? And what can you say about them that is true? I think you're always trying to get at truth, because if you try to say something and you try to make a brand act or behave or speak in a way that is not authentic to that brand, it's never going to work. And people will sense it, and the work will show it. So I think we start with that. And, for example, with KFC, the creative directors on that, they right when we got that business, they went down to the archive, and they were literally dug through the archive and looked at everything, and kind of really got to know like Colonel Sanders and what was he all about. And he was about, one of the things they found is he was very proud of his chicken recipe. He was very proud of his food. He cared about the quality of his food. And he was incredibly creative and persistent about selling it. And he would do anything, every possible way that he could think to become a part of culture, or to talk about fried chicken if it was Valentine's Day, he would figure out a way to talk to people about why chicken is romantic and they should go buy fried chicken. If it was the Super Bowl, whatever it was, he was a salesman, and he was very proud. And at that point, KFC had become ashamed of their product. They had, instead of Kentucky Fried Chicken, they only referred to it as KFC, because they were like, oh, we don't want to talk about it being fried. And the agency came up with the phrase pride in fried. And that became like a new thing internally at KFC, is like, we're going to be proud of what we make. We make great fried chicken.
That was something the agency came up with?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I think so. I didn't work on the brand directly, but I think the agency came up with, either way, it might've been a partnership, might've been a collaboration.
A complete paradigm shift of.
It was a total paradigm shift of like, we're going to be proud. We make fried chicken, and people love fried chicken, and we don't need to be ashamed of it. We're not going to tell people they need to eat fried chicken 3 meals a day, but fried chicken is good. And so that inspired the brand, really, of, we're going to be very proud of what we make, and we're going to sell it in the most creative ways that we possibly can in every possible cultural scenario that we can insert fried chicken into it in KFC. We're going to do it. And you look at the work of the past, 4 years, and that's what you'll see.
KFC has been like, of a lot of the brands that I think of, like from a social media standpoint, and just like, what was the thing? Weren't they sell? I feel like I saw an ad for like some Crocs or something, like something that was like some shoes that were like, that had.
Yeah, we did a collaboration with Crocs for KFC Crocs, and we're like fried chicken.
But
Crocs.
It's like it's a total like play on social media, or like, let's see if this can go viral, or let's see if we can get like a younger audience that notices KFC for the first time or whatever, right? Like, but did they really sell they really did a collaboration with them?
Oh yeah, they really made them, really sold them, and they just did a Hallmark? Oh, Lifetime. They just did an actual Lifetime romance movie with Colonel Sanders as the love interest, and it was like a 15 or 20 minute, and it ran on TV. It was Lifetime movie produced.
But the whole thing was intended just to be like a spoof, a comedic.
I mean, you should watch it. It's actually played very straight, and
oh man,
it's not really. It's played just like a Lifetime movie. It's not really played as a comedy, but it just happens to have.
From the introduction, is it like, this is Colonel Sanders, or do you figure out over time that it's Colonel Sanders? Like, wait a minute, is this the chicken guy?
Pretty early, you find his name is Harlan Sanders is his name. But going on, like we find the truth of the brand. That's kind of where you start. And sometimes that can be a challenge with a client that maybe they want to believe there's something different than they are, and they have to be honest, like, no, this is who you are. Let's find what's great about who you are. And then finding, where does that truth of the brand intersect with culture and with consumers, and where's that intersection? How do we make that brand truth relevant to people, and how do we do that in a way that they will love it, that we can create things that are not just tolerated as marketing, but that are embraced, that are loved, that are either inspiring or entertaining, something that's how you really build brand equity and brand love, is you make stuff that resonates and that people are happy that the brand showed up. They don't resent that the brand interrupted this cultural moment. They feel like, I'm actually happy that this brand was involved in this moment because they made it better.
So then from there, does the client come to you with, we need ideas? I mean, I know it's not always the same, but we need ideas. And then you come to the brand and say, based on our meetings and everything that we've discussed and talked about, this is what we feel like you need to, these are the messages you need to get across, these are the values that you need to portray through your marketing. And then do you at that point like storyboard some ideas out and then send that off for approval?
The strategic process, kind of coming up with the strategic insight, is a very collaborative process. There's a lot of back and forth with the client, and we need a lot of information from them, and they have insights that inform what we're doing. And there's a lot of back and forth there, but we land on and agree on a brief. Like, here's the strategic insight. Here's the idea that's gonna, that we're gonna brief the creatives with, and the client approves that.
Okay.
And then you brief the creative teams off that insight, and they come up with ideas, and then we bring back those, usually in a little bit rougher form, but not totally polished, but we bring back those campaign ideas to the client. And most cases, we bring back a few different approaches, a few different ideas, and with our recommendation, and see what the client wants to go with. But and sometimes, again, I'm describing it in a very linear way, and sometimes it's not linear, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes when we're creating the strategy, we feel that we have to show some initial creative thinking to explain the strategy. Mm-hmm. Occasionally, that will say, like, here's the strategic insight, and here's like an example of what a film would feel like off this strategic insight, or here's some headlines or whatever. But generally speaking, that's how it works. You go to them with some campaigns at that point, and hopefully they like what you did and they buy one, and you off to the races.
So I know you've talked about this so many times, but to kind of put this into practice so that somebody listening can understand kind of this process and what it looks like. But so you changed from what I can tell, and I know it wasn't just you. I'm going to give you credit, and I know you're going to say it was a whole team and a collaborative effort, but you were part of the team. I'll just preface it with that. You were part of the team that came up with the Old Spice ad. Was it in 2010 that you did the first Old Spice ad with Mustafa? Was it Mustafa? Is that his name?
2009 or two. Yeah, no, it was probably around 2010. I don't remember.
So again, we talked about this at the beginning, but the crazy thing here is that pretty much everybody listening to this most likely has seen at least one of those ads, right? Just by nature of being alive on Earth in the last 10, 15 years. So I guess 10 years. So you were part of the team that came up with this idea for really revitalizing the Old Spice brand. When I think of Old Spice pre-2010, I think of my grandpa in his medicine cabinet in his bathroom. He always had Old Spice. My grandpa smelled like Old Spice. It just seemed like something that I assimilated immediately. Like, oh yeah, I don't buy Old Spice. My grandpa buys Old Spice or whatever, right? Yeah. I don't know if everybody thought that. That's what I thought. So
everybody thought that.
Okay. And I remember, like, not even my grandpa, my great grandpa Guyman, he always smelled like he always had Old Spice on. So anyway, so you have that. That's the brand. You guys are tasked with, okay, we need to change this. We need to target a different demographic. It's not men that we're targeting. You are targeting men, but also targeting women that are, in a higher percentage of the case are going out and buying the deodorant and bringing it home and, whatever. So however that all played out, but you come up with this, like the team, you come up with this idea that is so far-fetched and kind of off the wall. But if you look back now, it absolutely changed the entire landscape for advertising. And again, you have a lot more context than I do, but as far as I can tell, if somebody came up to me on the street and said, what was like the pivotal moment? Why are there so many funny commercials on TV right now? Why is Liberty Mutual? Why do they have an ostrich? I think it's that company, like in their commercials, like with this goofy guy. And why is Progressive, like, why do they have this flow that's always doing these funny things? And why does Geico have whatever, right? Like it feels to me that maybe there was obviously comedic, you go back to like the Budweiser commercial stuff. There's obviously comedic commercials, but the way that the Old Spice ad went absolutely viral and the way that you leveraged social media and YouTube and everything else in order to get this brand on the map again in a huge way, and the way that brands use these comedic mediums in order to portray the brand message more broadly across the internet and stuff. You guys changed the game, right? There's a reason why you won all these Emmys for commercials, whatever those are called. You won a bunch of awards for it, and it took off. So what was that? Just give me the inner workings, a little bit of that process of being on that ride and that whole, I know you've talked about it so many times, so sorry, but
no. Well, first of all, you're right. I am going to give credit to the broader team.
Blah, blah, blah. It was all
namely my partner, Eric Baldwin, and the creative team, Craig Allen and Eric Coleman, and strategist Britton Taylor. These are all legends. The account director Jess Munzie, all amazing talents that I was surrounded with. But yeah, it was one of those things where we just thought we were doing what we always try to do. We tried to come up with the best idea we could under a tight timeline. And at the time we thought it was for a Super Bowl spot, which everyone still thinks that was a Super Bowl spot. It actually never ran on the Super Bowl. It ran.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I assumed.
Yeah. We kind of, our media team was really smart about getting people to think that it ran on the Super Bowl, but it didn't. And in fact, I think it won like best spot in the Super Bowl, and it wasn't even.
You're like, wait a minute.
But I think we definitely knew that it was special. I think we knew
straight out the gate, like from the idea, like in the ideation process was like, oh, this is going to be.
We didn't know how special it was, but I'll tell you this as to how we knew it was special. We actually kind of sold the client a different spot. So we presented that spot and I think one or two other spots, and it was for the Super Bowl, and the client gravitated toward a different spot. And at the time we thought, yeah, maybe that spot is the best one for the Super Bowl, because we were worried that there was the way the Man You Man Can Smell Like worked. You really needed to listen, pay attention. And we're like, maybe people aren't paying enough attention. The Super Bowl, they got friends over. And so we're like, oh yeah, this other spot's probably the best one. And we got off the call and we realized, I don't remember if it was like 1 hour, 2 hours later, we realized we just blew it. Like we have this amazing, totally unique spot, because the spot we sold them was not, it was funny. We thought it was really funny, but it wasn't like game changing unique. And we realized, wow, this spot is really special and we've never seen anything like it. And I think we made a mistake by letting the client buy that other one. And we set up a call for the next day with the client. We said, we need to get back on the phone with you. And I don't remember if we told them when we set up the call or on the call that we think we sold you the wrong spot. And in that meantime, we tweaked the copy a little bit to add a little bit to make the product work a little bit harder and to sell the product a little bit harder, because that was one of the things they liked about the other spot. And we represented. And by the time we got back on the phone with them, they had already sold the other spot. They'd sold it through their organization all the way up to the top. And everyone was excited about the other spot. And so to buy the Man You Man Can Smell Like, our clients were going to have to go unsell the other spot all the way up the organization again and sell this other spot.
Which having done, again, client work and on a way smaller scale, but that's a risky move. Like, because it's everything to get that buy off and that approval. If you go and get that buy off approval, and then, I mean, that's a huge risk to say, let's try to get them to buy off on another one and let's go through this process again.
For sure.
Because you're just the annoying ad agency at that point. That's like, it's like, shut up. We already approved. Why would they be coming to us with another one?
Yeah. And huge props to our client for doing that and for trusting us when we told them, like, this is really, you got something special here and we need to make this one happen. So huge credit to them. And then, so we knew it was special. I don't think we knew that it was going to become the most watched commercial in the history of YouTube for a time being. And then it was a nightmare to produce because it was all one take. So
I was going to say, that really was one all shot. It was one
shot. And so if there was even the slightest screw up, the whole thing was ruined. So it had to be completely flawless. Isaiah had to say every line, every word perfectly, and all the jokes were practical. There was very little CG in it.
Mm-hmm.
But like everything it was like a crazy Rube Goldberg experiment, and everything had to work perfectly. And we got the spot that the world has seen is the only usable take. That we only did it successfully one time.
Oh my God. How many times did you not do it right before that?
Like 3 or 3.5 solid days.
Oh my gosh. How far into it were you? Like, did we make the wrong call here? Like, because it goes from being really exciting and fun to like, are you kidding me? It's day 3 and we're still here trying to do this over and over again. I bet that was exhausting.
Yeah, it was pretty stressful, but made the edit easy because there was no edit.
Yeah.
Here it is.
So once it was done, once it was finished and then it airs, was there a huge, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place, but was there at this point, was there like a big digital marketing budget behind this? Was there like, oh, we need to push this on social media and stuff? I mean, I guess Instagram didn't even exist. So you had Facebook, you had YouTube. What was that like? How did you get it? How did it go viral, I guess?
I don't remember the specifics of the media plan. It had a big television media by. And then of course it got posted on YouTube. So I think most people saw it on TV and then went to YouTube to rewatch it and share it.
That's even changed a lot in 10 years.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, that's, man. And then that just took off. I remember that was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. It was like first time I'd ever seen a commercial that made me like seriously, legitimately laugh, and not just like laugh like, oh, ha, ha, ha. It was like, oh my gosh, that was so clever. I mean, the copy in that was perfect. Like the actor did an unbelievable job. It was just like lightning in a bottle, I'm guessing, right? Like everything came together perfectly for that one shot that you got out of 3.5 days of shooting it. And then it went on to win all sorts of awards. I mean, was that next year just like was that a huge skyrocketing moment career-wise?
Oh yeah. I mean, yes, it was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind. It was amazing. It was just really fun to kind of experience that with my team, with all my friends at work that were part of my team. And there's kind of nothing better. Like it's one thing to experience something amazing and victorious and celebratory by yourself.
Yeah.
That you've done. But when you accomplish something as a team, it's just multiplied by, exponentially of how incredible that experience is, and kind of bonds you for life, when you go through something like that.
Yeah.
It's very stressful. And that was kind of just the beginning of all the crazy things that we would end up producing on that brand, and the insane productions and the kind of impossible. We were constantly trying to do. In fact, we used to tell creative teams when we would brief them on a new campaign, if it's possible and within budget, we're not interested. And because we wanted them to just like completely
stretch themselves,
like, don't worry about anything. Of course the budget mattered. Of course we were going to be limited by a certain amount of budget, but we didn't want them thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a result, our teams would bring us ideas that were considered impossible, and that producers would tell you like, no, this can't be done. And we would just always try to find, like, if we thought it was a great enough idea, we would try to find a way to do it. And that is incredibly stressful and incredibly difficult when you're pioneering new ways of doing things all the time. But if you succeed, it's just like you have a story for the rest of your life, and you have an experience, and you're kind of bonded with those. It's like going to battle with your team, and there's a bond, and it's an amazing thing to go through with a team.
Yeah, man, such a awesome and inspiring story from beginning to where you are now. So tell us kind of like at this point, where are you? What are the next steps? And I guess if you can, this is kind of a big question because there's a lot going on in the world right now, so it might be hard to answer, but if you can, what are you hopeful for at this point as you're looking to the future for you personally, career, world, US, whatever it's too big of a question this week, but where, tell us what's next and what you're working on. And then also where you're seeing and finding hope in January of 2021.
I hope to get a good haircut at some point. That's big on my list.
And that's it. Thank you so much for.
And I'm out. No, I mean, gosh, that's a loaded question. I really hope that we can come together as a country. I really hope that we can all, everybody on all sides of the political spectrum can forgive each other and get along and like put the country first. I know that's not the specific question you're asking, but I'm going to just check that one off because that's what I'm feeling this week is we are a big country with a lot of different ideas and different beliefs, and we have to find a way to respect each other and just come together and try to make the country the wonderful place that we all hope that it can be. And, the events of last week or a nightmare that I don't ever want to see repeated. But that's a big hope. But in terms of personally, I just want to keep making these stories and like having these experiences. I want to keep the same way I'm retelling these amazing experiences that I went through with my teams, and we had these audacious goals and these audacious ambitions to do things that were crazy and that would bring joy and entertainment to the world. And years later, we're still talking about those stories. That's what I want to continue to do. I want to continue to do things that are bold and crazy and audacious enough that the people that I do them with are talking about them, and hopefully the world is talking about them years later. And I want to, part of that is bringing like the new generation along in that process and teaching whatever things that I've learned, sharing that with a younger generation, and also continue to learn from them as well. They have a lot of insight, and whenever there's a new generation, there's new ways of doing things, there's new ways of thinking about things, and I'm always excited by that. But I think I have a lot left to do in my career and in my life, and also a lot more. I've been so blessed with so many things, and the amazing career that I've been blessed to have, that I also feel that responsibility to give back and to try to allow other people to have the types of experiences that I've had, and to have those opportunities, and to really, I'm in a position now where I'm more interested in kind of highlighting and giving other people the stage and the opportunity, and using whatever experience I have and whatever, wisdom, if I've gained any, to facilitate that and provide that, and set the stage and the environment for them to do amazing, crazy stuff.
Cool. Well, I've seen that part in action when you came out and helped out with that BYU Hawaii program. And I know how much the students there, the younger generation of so many of the students that we worked with there in entrepreneurship and digital advertising and whatever, I was there for a while after you were there, and always heard about, you as a judge when you came out, and the mentorship that you provided and the conversations and insight that you gave. So it's awesome. You're the man, dude. I appreciate it. I know we went way over what I had initially said, but I've always been fascinated by your career and you as an individual, and enjoyed the time we've had together. So I appreciate you taking
Cool.
some time and being on the podcast.
No, thanks for having me. It's really fun.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Bye, Corey.
Hello, it's Corey here. And I just want to thank you so much for listening into the Hope Strategy podcast. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are enjoying having these amazing conversations with these incredible individuals talking about hope. We'd love it if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review on iTunes or Spotify or anywhere that you listen to your podcasts, and share it with anybody you feel that can benefit from these messages of hope. Thank you so much for listening to the Hope Strategy Podcast.